very much, everyone. So the future is now Anticipatory Anthropology starts with the fact that the two of us met some time ago, and both of us were doing our PhDs on Europeanization. I was doing research on visions of Europe in Polish press. Alex was doing research with Polish border guards and Polish-German border, right? So in the hindsight, it turns out that probably we were doing some sort of future anthropology of the future, but we were not calling it that. In the years to come, we started to cooperate on various other subjects and in various other forms, including summer schools and making conference panels together. But also more recently, and I give my floor to Alex just to say what we've been doing recently.
Well, I've been told that I should pronounce B's and P's because that somehow causes problems here. Yes, we have been collaborating a lot over the last decades. You really feel old when you say decades. I can only recommend to each and every one of you to collaborate with Anya because she will take you to wonderful places for summer schools, and she is an excellent partner in collaboration. And so, yeah, it's just my warmest recommendations. We have been, in the past few years, we have started to work on something that particularly caught our attention, and that is the fact that if you look at the climate crisis, that there's a particular urgency that is formulated at a European level, but and that translates to other level, and that exists also, that this urgency also exists in other domains of society. And we thought, okay, hey, that's a really interesting field to do research on, particularly since our two cities are cooperating. No, they're not cooperating, but they are all they are in the same EU program of 100 cities that are supposed to become climate neutral by 2030. And then we took on board Ljubljana, because we also have a friend there, and Ljubljana is also in that program. So we won a grant for our wonderful project, Competing Urgencies, Translating Climate Neutrality Policy in the European Union.
And Marisha over here is also part. And Anya Ptak over there was also part, so we're very thankful for all our collaborators. And Renata Putkowska-Smolter is also here. See you. Hello.
So if you're interested in what we're doing, please take a flyer, follow us, and yeah.
Absolutely. So to turn to the two of us, I would like to say a few words about my colleague over here. So as I said, Alex was getting her education in Germany, and actually in Poland, in Poznan. She studied at Humboldt University, right? And also received her PhD from Biedrina. And she worked on a number of various topics, including insecurity, Europeanization, anthropology of the political, border studies, the state and bureaucracy, emotional effects, and as you heard, urgency is the conceptualization that Alex brings to our project. So the fieldwork she's done has also been with Polish anarchists, with the border guards, with the officials, and she's also been involved in a variety of projects, ranging from research on football, fandom, and here, hello to Albert, you can connect on that, and then she also did research on world heritages. And today, apart from our project on climate neutrality, she's also involved in two other projects related to climate change, and this is Klagenfurt Goes Climate Neutral, Participation and Justice in the City of the Future, and City Science Lab, University at Klagenfurt.
And to my right, we have Anna Horolets, and I want to introduce her as well. Her background is in linguistics, in sociology, and in social anthropology. and she has been working extensively on mobility and migration studies, also on leisure studies. That's the opposite.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. Leisure studies and environmental anthropology. And she has recently co-edited a wonderful volume about failure. So a book that is not a failure at all, but that is about failure. She has been conducting fieldwork in Poland, in the UK, and in the US, mostly among migrants and tourists, and she has written a book about Polish independent tourists visiting the countries of the former USSR, and she is now presenting her research to you.
Thank you very much. For today, we decided to pick the topics and show you the snippets of our research that is related in one way or the other to the future. And actually, those would be the two different types of future we'll be talking about. My presentation is based on another collaboration with wonderful sociologists, Adriana Mika, who was the mastermind behind the project, Mikołaj Pawlak and Paweł Kubicki, and 4 research assistants, Barbara Tołoczko, Kosmina Paul, Balin Dora, and Mark Kekeshi. We did research in 1720, and it was devoted to the reactions to the so-called refugee crisis in Europe, in the 3 countries, Poland, Hungary, and Romania. We looked at the newspaper discourse, and this was partly my major responsibility in the project, but also spoke with the officials and various experts and stakeholders in refugee and asylum policy field in those 3 countries. And I will present you today a fragment of this research that is directly related to the future. One thing we were particularly interested in is that in 2015 there was a dramatic change in how people in Poland started to approach the question of refugeeness, and they answered to the question, would you like Poland to accept refugees, increasingly with a no. So here, for example, in just 5 months in the summer, from 21% there was 38%, and then further on even a further increase, and 61% said no, we don't want refugees in Poland. So this was the moment when the refugee issue and the issue of what we do with people who seek refuge in a different country, it came out of the shadows. This coming out of the shadows, actually the moment that before 2015 in Poland the refugee policy was carried out in a technocratic fashion. So everything was done according to Geneva Convention and the European laws, and all the procedures were in place, and although there were not many applications and not many positive decisions on those few, still it was kind of carried out. But in this year, which was the year of parliamentary election, and Law and Justice was running for power against the then governing coalition, which included Citizens' Platform, this issue became politicized and became a subject of fearmongering. And what we suggest, and this is what I want to talk about, is that projective representation of the issue was very important in congealing this fear and giving it a real shape. So what you see here is the fragment from what we found in our press analysis. And this is far-right media, which are instigated by far-right politicians, and they speak about refugees' projective agency, so what refugees will do, in terms that imply that refugees are both very powerful and very evil at the same time. So you see here they are also being associated with Muslims, and this is being ascribed a very negative sense, but I will leave this aside for a while and focus and draw your attention to the fact that they are represented as outnumbering us and driving us away from our habitual ways of life. This quotation was very representative and very typical of what's being done, and I would like to draw your attention to the fact that here there are a lot of numbers, and of course the analysis of the use of numbers in media discourse and in othering has been well studied. We know that it's dehumanizing, but we think that it's also doing something more and something else. So here there is a lot of pointing at the numbers that are not actual numbers we know of, but the numbers that will come to be. And there is a dramatic exaggeration. So we actually in the relocation program of the EU that's been discussed at that point in time, so that the countries who get many arrivals can share, and in a spirit of solidarity can probably have the help of other countries with accepting those people and trying to help them. So here you see that Poland was supposed to take in, quote unquote, 6,000 people, and here we are driven up to 500,000 people, very skillfully, just in a matter of several turns of it will be coming like that, they will be bringing their families, there are more and more people coming, and it's all in the future. So what we came up with was this term and concept of reification of the future, and we used reification not in the Marxist sense, but in a very vocabulary meaning of the term. It was treating something abstract as or imaginary as a real thing, and it was a cognitive and psychological, social as well process that treated a scenario or possibility as something real that actually existed and was binding. So it brought future into existence, it congealed it in a certain form, and it also triggered the possibility of very real, effective political mobilization, which we see in the election results, and actually which we can see that now spread around, and the currently centrist government is kind of continuing on this note, unfortunately. So there was a preemptive also effect of cutting out the alternative futures. But there were alternative futures, and that's what came out in our conversations with various officials already after the crisis. So for one, we were prepared. This is what we've heard. Actually, there was an ongoing process to prepare the reception centers, and people who were actually working on the ground, the street-level bureaucracy, so to speak, was prepared to accept the refugees and to do what was required within the relocation scheme. The second part of what was missed out and what was an alternative future was that the past, which was also erased, and the relocation scheme already worked in Poland, although it was a very small and insignificant number. Also, there was a different attitude that was in place. For example, when Poland joined Schengen area in 1927, there was an upsurge of people appearing at Polish border and asking for asylum. And actually, the reception centers were full, but nobody spoke about it in the media. And lastly, maybe, there were alternative futures and predictions that looked at another way of seeing relocation program as something that could be beneficial to Poland. And actually, in this quotation from 2017, we have an almost accurate prediction of what actually happened in 2021 after the full-scale war started when Russia attacked Ukraine in February. But here it's presented as a plausible scenario, but nobody was listening to it back then. So to conclude, we think that this mechanism of dealing with the future, reification of the future, relies on ignorance. The neglected possible futures in 2015 evolved exactly in this fashion, that the officials knew that there are alternative possibilities in the future, but they were suppressed at the level of their organizations, and the knowledge about those alternatives were completely erased and willfully ignored. So it's a strategic ploy, ignorance is a strategic ploy, willfully ignored by the politicians and then this ignorance has spread to the general public. So in a way, it's a kind of sad story, but what probably anthropology can do is at least to remind about those alternative possible futures and keep the eyes and minds of whoever wants to listen open to the fact that alternative futures are kind of possible and they're always there. Thank you. And now...
I wish the blackout came. I really do. I'm so fed up with everybody's mentality that the state is expected to provide for everything. This is a quote from a conversation with a leading disaster manager in the southern Austrian land of Carinthia. We had been meeting for some time to talk about blackout precautions. And at this time, normally he's very calm, but on this occasion he was really very agitated. He's an experienced and very dedicated crisis manager. And in this rural region of Austria, there are a lot of floodings, mudslides, avalanches, all these kind of disasters. They happen a lot, and each of these disasters is specific and singular, and none of them is actually surprising. All of them can somehow be dealt with, and this official had a lot of experience because of his long career. He had seen a lot. So as I said, we were talking about blackout precaution and also about blackout pedagogy, education, raising awareness for blackout precaution. And in our earlier conversations, he had very calmly explained to me how the provincial government and his agency in particular were preparing for a blackout disaster, and about his ideas how to reach the public, how to get the message to them. He very much rejected any kind of sensationalist scaremongering. He did not like it at all when politicians or professional crisis experts stoke up fears, and he suspected that in that case that was mostly based on a desire for money or for votes, or sometimes both. His approach was different. Very steadily, even stubbornly, he wanted to remind the public of the need to take precautions without creating a panic. He had things in mind such as stockpiling a reasonable amount of supplies. You should always know where your children are in the case of a disaster. You know where your medication and your documents are. So these are the very basic things, and to his mind, that kind of preparation should rather go unnoticed, should be a part of everyday life. And this day, he completely lost his temper, and he let his frustrations run wild. He said, "Let the blackout come, and then we'll see who listened. Then they will all look really dumbfounded when nothing will be done for them. They are on their own." I was quite surprised, not only because that was so different from how I had known him before, but this frustration that he showed also echoed a narrative that I found quite often when talking to officials, when they were talking with or about the public regarding blackout precaution. A lot of them said, "I want the blackout to come and teach them a lesson." The blackout. This blackout has been preoccupying Austrian state agencies and disaster managers for more than a decade now. But what are we actually talking about? I think we're actually talking about two blackouts. One is a blackout with the small letter B, and there's another one with the capital letter B, or a blackout and the blackout. A blackout with a small b is the power outage itself. A large-scale and worst-case European-wide blackout. There is actually a definition of the EU Commission what qualifies as a blackout. So if you're thinking, yeah, I've had power outages myself at home, in my region, sometimes even for more than a day, that doesn't qualify as a blackout. The blackout is much, much bigger. And the blackout we're talking about here, we're talking about blackout precaution, this is the really big thing. In that kind of blackout, telecommunication, water infrastructure, shopping, transportation, all that will be impossible at least for a few hours, if not days, before the power supply is restored. And no matter which official I talked to, they all routinely knew what a large-scale power cut meant for their work, what the playbook for that case looked like. They were quite prepared. And indeed, studies claim that large-scale Europe-wide blackout would bring society to the brink of collapse within a few days. And it's not so much technology that disaster professionals worry about. What worries them is what I call the blackout with a capital B. The disaster created by and following the power outage. It's this what will happen when the lights go out. What will happen when the lights go out? To be honest, nobody really knows. And it's this discrepancy between the small and the capital letter B that provides the grounds for insecurities, for fears, for uncertainty. And it opens up a liminal time space between the here and now and the not so distant future. And this invites speculation, imagination, fears, and hopes. And it's this time space of the blackout disaster that interests me. So, a blackout is not entirely unlikely. We've seen one in Portugal and Spain very recently, and that took only a few hours, or half a day, I think. But it reminds us that these things can happen. Blackouts happen for various reasons, because of accidents, extreme weather, terrorism, of course, armed conflicts, attacks on critical infrastructure, hacking, and so on and so forth. So there can be a lot of different reasons why a blackout happens. And that is also what makes a blackout, in general, a security issue, with regard to a lot of dimensions of security and safety. So state agencies in recent years have increasingly not only prepared for that kind of disaster, but they have also increasingly reached out to the public under the banner of blackout precaution. The province I live in, Carinthia, Canton, launched a big campaign in 2022. It was called, maybe a bit weirdly, Day X, When the Lights Go Out in Carinthia. And this campaign included posters, radio spots, a hashtag, of course, and a tour through 10 Corinthian towns with the governor and the local mayor and all the emergency services. This is actually how I became interested in the blackout, because suddenly there were all these posters and I thought, where is this coming from? Why? We just lived through the pandemic. Why do we have to prepare for a blackout? But that's not all. Blackout-related products and objects generally have been mushrooming in Austria. Parents need to sign a form now what schools and kindergartens are supposed to do with children in the event of a blackout. Other provinces also do that. All the ministries, no, not all, but most of the ministries, the army, civil protection, they all have their separate blackout PR. And of course there's also private companies who want to make money with selling blackout preparation boxes, very much overpriced preparation boxes. So everyone is waiting for the blackout to come. And then there's one feature that distinguishes, or at least one feature that distinguishes the blackout from other disasters, and that is, even if we look at Spain and Portugal, the large, European-wide, really large blackout is a disaster without a precedent. It has not happened yet. Smaller power failures, yes, but not an actual Europe-wide blackout. And what also distinguishes a blackout from the blackout, small and capital letter, is that it is humans who create the disaster in the blackout. It's humans who turn a crisis into a catastrophe. The small blackout can be calculated. It can be measured, you can prepare for that, because you more or less know what is going to happen and how you deal with, for example, technological challenges. The capital blackout a capital letter blackout, however, is a subject of imagination and as such of speculation and anticipation. So when I was talking to various state actors and also emergency services, I would meet a lot of fantasies about how the population will react to a large Europe-wide blackout. And most of them were very deeply pessimistic scenarios. So basically what most of them said in a nutshell is, when the lights go out, it is not just electricity that will be gone, but civilization as we know it will disappear. Maybe not on day one, maybe not on day two, but then violence and looting begin. The blackout reveals the ugliness of human nature that lies underneath the thin veneer of civilization. When the lights go out and darkness is all around us, it's all against all. This is basically what they tell people in these blackout campaigns, what they tell me. And this is the basis for why many of them say the human factor must be contained before it's too late. That is, before the disaster strikes. And that's the role of politics, the role of the state to act now to save the future. And this is, because we don't know when the blackout will strike, this is an urgent matter. I want to say a few words about urgency. And I want to make 4 points about urgency. First, if something is declared urgent, then something that is a valued good, that is claimed to be endangered by an actual or anticipated emergency, is put in the center. And this valued good could be health, personal well-being, security, the nation state, climate. And naming that valued good as being endangered is a deliberate action, because nothing is urgent in itself. It always becomes urgent in relation to something through someone's action. Urgency then is always relational. It reflects power dynamics, historical legacies, and also inequalities. Secondly, urgency establishes a time frame that situates the here and now, the present, between the past and a not yet future. And this not yet future will happen if we do not act in the here and now. So when urgency is declared, the clock starts ticking and the future is onrushing. And the window of opportunity for action becomes smaller and smaller until the point where the future begins and can no longer be changed. Thirdly, urgency has an affective dimension. It makes an impression not only on minds but on bodies as well. And I think that's very clear, because we know that when something meaningful is urgent, then the blood level rises, adrenaline kicks in, there's sweat, there's a heightened focus, all of that. And finally, the uncertainty inscribed in the sense of urgency is a crucial element of urgency, and this is what I term the urgent uncanny. It's this uncanny atmosphere of not knowing the onrushing future and not knowing when the future begins. So when something is declared urgent, we live in the time that remains. But how much time is left? How much time is left to prepare and to be ready? I consider this uncanny element crucial because it points us towards a more general cultural imaginary about what a blackout means. But let us linger on the sentence that I mentioned earlier for a moment. When the blackout comes, let the blackout come. The blackout appears as one coherent thing, even a subject that acts, that follows intentions, maybe even has motivations. Nobody says it happens. Nobody says a blackout happens. It's all the blackout comes. So I think there's a kind of quasi-religious element in blackout urgency politics that has to do with a kind of apocalyptic and dystopian imaginary that it evokes and that it relates to. There are, in fact, several blackouts in the Bible, and I if there are any religious scholars here, please correct me, because I'm not a religious scholar. I just found it really, really interesting to dig into that direction. So one of the blackouts in the Bible is the 9th plague in the book of Exodus, directed against the Egyptian pharaoh. And like the biblical blackout and all the biblical monsters you encounter there, the blackout, and I'm quoting Richie here, can convey ideas about what's considered normal and good or deviant. So there's always a moral dimension to the blackout as well. The blackout resembles the apocalypse that signifies not only the end of the old world, but the beginning of something new, a better community after the disaster. So in secular terms, the blackout is not an end in the sense of an end of history, but the end of a particular story. There's a new beginning, a rebirth that awaits us after the end has come. And this is what the urgency refers to, preparation for a post-disaster community. Urgency politics envisions an ideal community that can overcome the crisis, but it must call upon this ideal community in the here and now. So in a kind of temporal twist, it imagines a community rebuilding before it has been destroyed. And for this ideal community to come into existence, it has to evoke it, or the foundation for it, in the present. And in a kind of act of interpellation, in the sense of Althusser, blackout pedagogy creates a collective subjectivity, an imagined community that is bound together by a common fate. For example, in this Day X campaign that I mentioned earlier, the governor said, and you're here now in the city hall of the town of Verlach, and this man here is Austria's leading blackout expert, who has been saying for the last 10 years that the blackout will come within the next 5 years. So at this campaign, the governor said, "You, our parents, colleagues, take responsibility, acquire knowledge, pass it on. If the public isn't prepared, state measures cannot work. Every single citizen, every land, every town must be prepared." The representative of the Office for Civil Protection said, "Whether you are an entrepreneur or a farmer, every single one of you counts. Day X will come." So it depends on each and every member of the society, not only how they will live through the disaster, but also how this new disaster, post-disaster beginning can be possible. Each member of the community bears responsibility for the whole. Precaution is thus not just a rational necessity for me and myself and my loved ones, but it becomes a legal and a moral responsibility. And those who do not prepare, those who do not listen, they do not make this choice on their own behalf, but as members of the collective. So blackout precaution confronts the public not only with the decision to buy an emergency generator or to stockpile pasta and water and toilet paper, but blackout is a moment of truth, a moral appeal that also entails a hidden threat, if you will. If you do not act now, you will regret it. The public is told to anticipate judgment after the crisis, judgment from their own personal perspective, but also with regard to the collective. So precaution pedagogy forces the public into a kind of confessionary complex where they are told to imagine their disaster self and their post-disaster self, how they will behave and how they will interact with members of the community when the disaster strikes. And when everything is over, they will be repenting and they will be unable to make amends because it will be too late when the blackout will have come. So to conclude, precautionary measures may help to alleviate the crisis. They may help to avoid a disaster. But if we look at precaution pedagogy, or awareness raising as a specific element within a larger strategy of urgency politics, then we see that what is at stake here is not so much the disaster itself, but the mobilization targets citizen-state relations. This sense of urgency that is generated to take precautions entails a promise. It takes away the individual's fear of being responsible for the imagined community's failure. These precautionary measures give the impression, and they also give the illusion, of security and safety in the here and the now. It's peace of mind for the public and peace of mind for the state agencies and the emergency services. I thank you very much.